this could be dangerous when combined with sport and exercise. And also for a child or a teen, they can skip heartbeats, they can have arrhythmias.
Hi, guys. Welcome to the Strong Female Athlete Podcast. Just want to give a quick shout out to our official sponsor, Simply Faster, a company dedicated to better tools and better technology for athlete development. If you're serious about gaining speed and power, I highly recommend you check out their amazing products and technology that's really taking athletes and coaches to the next level. So be sure to check them out, and let's get into today's guest. Lindsay, welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks, Erica. Love chatting with you.
So everyone, we are talking about caffeine today, and I've heard a lot of stories of young kids slamming energy drinks and girls chugging a lot of coffee before games, and we are going to talk about the truth of preteen and teen caffeine consumption for sport performance and just overall cognitive health. So we're going to get into a lot today. My caffeine journey is very interesting, and I actually started drinking coffee in high school, but it wasn't to get energy for soccer or for school. It was more of like a social thing. Like when I got my license, I always remembered like I would go to Dunkin' Donuts with my girlfriends, and it was more just social, like getting a nice coffee, not overdoing it. And we'll talk about amounts later in the episode, but just getting a nice coffee and then just enjoying the taste of it in the morning. And that was really it. Thankfully, I don't have an addictive personality, so I didn't get wild with caffeine. In college, it was still social, just studying in the coffee shops with your friends. I'm sure you can relate and everyone can relate.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's kind of just the same thing. Like I just like the taste of it in the morning. And I do get a boost of energy, not gonna lie, but I don't overdo it. I think that's the most important thing is when our young kids start really early or they overdo it, it can lead to some repercussions down the road, and they can't really control addiction to caffeine because their tolerance gets all out of control. So maybe Lindsay, do you want to discuss your journey with caffeine? You are a registered dietitian, so I'm very curious to hear before we get into it.
Similar to you, my like journey with caffeine starts with coffee, which started for love of ice cream, coffee flavored ice cream. It was my favorite flavored ice cream as a kid. It still is actually. And so I liked the taste. And then when I was 16, one of my first jobs was actually at a coffee shop. And so I started drinking coffee when I worked the 6 a.m. shift on a Sunday morning as a 16-year-old. I would definitely drink coffee and just fun flavors. But I don't think I got into drinking coffee regularly in the morning until I think I did start drinking it by senior year of high school. I did like have a small cup of coffee before school. It was small though. Like as an adult, I have a larger cup of coffee in the morning now. It was small and it had a lot of creamer in it. That's really what I liked. I liked the creamer. And I worked at the coffee shop where I was making those fancy blended drinks. And so it was a lot of, the cream and milk and sugar too. But I've always basically then in college, I was a coffee drinker in the morning. And that was mostly it of just a cup of coffee in the morning. And then as a sports dietitian, once I kind of was in my mid 20s and participating in sports, I dabbled with like pre-workout supplements that have some caffeine in them, and how does that affect me and my performance and things like that, which I've gone in and out of. It's not something I necessarily use regularly. It depends on my training and my goals and time of day, and did I already have coffee? Do I really need pre-workout again? Probably not, so it kind of depends, but I have some experience with those. And then full disclosure, my husband is addicted to Monster energy drinks. So those are in our house, and I don't drink them, but they're in our house. I'm very familiar with them. And that's my journey with caffeine. As a extremely exhausted mom of two little ones, I'm drinking more caffeine now than I ever have. I realize that what I really need is sleep. For the time being, I am drinking 2, sometimes 3 cups of coffee a day. That's a full disclosure.
Well, I'm glad you're being honest, but it sounds like just early on in your journey and pretty much through this whole time, it wasn't like too addictive. You were just having just enough because you enjoy the taste. And I totally agree with you with the coffee ice cream. Like I just all my dad always had that flavor. And I'm like, oh, I didn't know you could have coffee and ice cream. That's actually pretty
Yeah.
good. And I think just like the coffee flavored taste in the morning, it just even if you do decaf, it mentally, I feel it still wakes you up. It's really weird.
Yeah. It's the vibe, really.
It's the vibe. Yeah, it's totally the vibe.
I
Okay,
will say, just as an FYI though, decaf coffee still has trace amounts of caffeine, but really small amounts. So where one cup of coffee might have like 80 to 100 milligrams of caffeine, a cup of decaf might have like 20 milligrams.
okay,
But just some people are very sensitive to caffeine and will even feel that small amount of decaf coffee affects them. So especially if some people get into like adults get into this, hopefully not our teenagers, but some adults will get into like having a decaf coffee at nighttime. But even that might affect people in their sleep
okay, got
because
it.
of the trace caffeine.
So I know we're talking a lot about coffee, but the main forms of caffeine I'm seeing, and I don't know if it's the same with the young athletes you work with, but it's in the
Mhm.
form of these energy drinks. So you mentioned Monster energy drinks,
Yeah.
Red Bull as well. Celsius is a really popular
Mhm.
one, and I've gone to youth tournaments where I will overhear parents saying, "Oh, we just gave our 12-year-old 2 Celsius before these 5 games this week, and she's ready to go." And I'm like, "That's probably not how a
No.
12-year-old should be getting energy, and that amount of caffeine is very dangerous for their brain." So, let's start there. Why
Yeah.
why is it not good for preteens and teenage female athletes to have caffeine at these ages and then just overdo it through the rest of their sports career?
Caffeine is a drug. It's a stimulant. And its effects on our entire whole body and our entire system. One of the concerns when we talk about stimulants is it's stimulating your central nervous system and it's stimulating your heart. It literally gets your heart beating and pumping faster. And this can be dangerous when combined with sport and exercise, and also for a child or a teen who's still developing. When we start seeing like increased heart rate and central nervous stimulation and exercise, this can actually become very dangerous. They can skip heartbeats, they can have arrhythmias. I pulled up some stats, just let me find it here. Where did it go? Okay, yes. In 2011, I know this is old, but in 2011, there were 1,500 teens in the US aged 12 to 17 that went to the ER for energy drink related uh, emergencies, basically, which was all related to like, I'm out of, like, my heartbeat's out of control, which is really scary. This is your heart. And there's deaths associated with too many stimulants because your heartbeat skips beats and has arrhythmias. And then from 2017 to 2023, so a little more updated research here, ER trips doubled of teens showing up to the ER with energy drink related symptoms. And in 2023, there was a 24% increase in poison control call about teens and young adults consuming too much caffeine from energy drinks specifically, and including between the ages of 6 to 11. So I think this goes to show that this energy drink specifically, because like more like, okay, maybe a 10-year-old isn't drinking coffee, but a 10-year-old is being exposed to these energy drinks. And the concern is the caffeine is a stimulant on your central nervous system and your heart. It can cause true issues in your heart and your cardiac function that can be immediate, that can be emergent, especially when you combine with exercise, especially dehydration as well, which is all related, right? Like when you're exercising, when you're playing a game, your heart's beating fast, you're dehydrated, and now you've got something affecting how your heart functions. That's the big scary danger that I want to warn people about. And this danger exists for adults as well, but maybe one difference here is like, I don't know, like you've had a few years of experience with some caffeine, some coffee, you know your body a little bit better, your heart is fully developed. When you're an adult, your heart isn't fully developed yet as a kid. And so it's just one of those things where like an adult is able to handle it more so than a child can. And you're maybe on top of your hydration a bit better, things like that, that as a kid you might not be on top of.
Mhm. Hey guys, just want to take a quick moment to shout out our sponsor, Simply Faster, and one of my favorite speed timing systems from them, the Free Lap. I use it for my own sprint training as well as for my athletes, and they love it. It's super easy to set up, you can take it to the field on your own, and you can get accurate speed times to track your progress. Check the Free Lap link in the caption below to start adding timing into your speed sessions. If you know me, you know I love my Free Lap. If you're serious about speed, it's time to start timing. Oh my gosh, that's really scary because now I just think about the parents I've interacted with at these tournaments, and we're in Florida down here, and we're talking like 90, 100-degree weather in the summer, and
Yeah.
then on top of that you have the humidity and how much sweat they're losing, and then they're having like energy drinks, and then it's just a recipe for disaster. So I didn't really think about the whole picture of all of that, and I think a lot of parents are like, well, like, what harm's it's gonna cause? And we're just gonna give them an energy drink and they'll be good to go. They're a kid, they're
Yeah.
resilient. And I'm like, no,
Mm-mm.
actually, like you said, they're still developing. So to give them something as potent as caffeine is really dangerous.
And there's two other points I want to hit on. One, the total amount of caffeine really matters here, and this is the other issue, is that typically our youth and teens are going to be a smaller body size than an adult. And this is a dose response thing based on body size. Like your body size and weight affects your metabolism of this drug. And so somebody who is larger can safely metabolize a larger amount of caffeine than a child or a teen that is smaller body fat, smaller muscle mass, smaller body size in general. So when we get to the adult research on the benefits of caffeine, it always comes down to an equation with your weight of how much caffeine is recommended per kilogram of your body weight. And so that's another thing to think about. And um, I just want to say too, for adults, that typically, like if you come out to like a 150-pound person, which I'm not saying that that's an average weight, I'm just picking a number. Let's say an adult is 150 pounds. The amount of caffeine that's beneficial for exercise performance is going to be between probably around 200 to 400 milligrams. Okay, so now let's think about like, yeah, a 12-year-old girl who might only weigh 110 pounds or 80 pounds, who knows? Um, that's a lot less. And now we think about caffeine amounts that we can get into, but these energy drinks, you can see it right on the can. A Monster is 160 milligrams. Celsius is 200 milligrams.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's crazy.
Some energy drinks like Bang, and there's another one that can be up to 300 milligrams per can. So we're talking about, this is a decent slash high amount for an adult. Now we're talking about a child that's could potentially be in a smaller body that's not going to metabolize it as fast. That means it's going to be in the system longer or have more severe effects on the system.
Mhm.
So that like specific, the other thing, the dose I wanted to talk about that's important here, and just to put up front too, the American Academy of Pediatrics recommends that children under 12 do not consume any caffeine. It's not recommended. The stimulant on the heart, it's not healthy for them. And then for teens, like so from 12 to 18, it's recommended to limit it to 100 milligrams of caffeine a day. So again, as I just mentioned, a Monster has 160 per can, or Celsius with 200 milligrams per can. That's double what they should be consuming in an entire day, not just in one singular dose. So that amount matters. But one other thing I want to hit on too, the energy drink specific, not just caffeine, but a lot of energy drinks have additional ingredients in it. And this is what makes energy drinks more risky than just a cup of coffee. Is there's possibly additional stimulants in the energy drink. So, for example, guarana seed extract is a natural stimulant that's in a lot of energy drinks. Yerba mate, that's an additional source of caffeine and its own stimulant. Um, what are some other ones? Yohimbe, if you've seen that one on some labels.
No.
Okay.
I've seen the others. What about, like, just super high amounts of B12? Is
Yeah,
that
so that's
okay
not,
or
yeah, that's not technically a stimulant, so I'll get to that
Okay.
in a moment, but what
Yeah.
I want to say is these other ingredients that people that are in an energy drink, because this the FDA doesn't consider this a drug, it's considered a food slash supplement, which the FDA doesn't regulate, but you
Mhm.
can actually have more than just caffeine. You might be stacking multiple supplements that are having multiple different effects on the heart, and that's where the danger comes into play. And yeah, I think when it comes to like that risk that I want to get across to parents of their teen athletes is like this is a true heart health issue, combining multiple stimulants and exercise and heat and dehydration. This is a big health risk, and fatalities do occur every year in the United States because of energy drinks. Just FYI. I also, sorry if I'm being like super scary here, but I also in addition to sports nutrition, I've done a lot of work with the military, the US military, and there's, some military, you might be 18, 19, you're still pretty young. And we see a big energy drink consumption in the US military. And then they're in full uniform, they're exercising, and we see sudden death because of that. So that's a big problem too. But I want to relate that to a similar situation of like the exercise, the heat, the stimulant use. It's a problem.
Yeah, I think that's just, like, such a good place to start of just why it's so dangerous because I just don't think people are really, like, looking into it. They're just like, "Well, it's sold in the local grocery store, so it must be
Hmm.
okay." Or it's a natural supplement with these natural stimulants, but just because it's natural doesn't mean it's good all the time. So
Right.
I think that's also an important point. Beyond just the heart, issues and then the dehydration, anything on how this could affect a young girl's brain, just like needing that constant stimulation or that dopamine, or even just amplifying anxiety more. If a young
Yeah.
girl suffers from anxiety, I mean, it can't be good for cognitive development either.
No. And so this is interesting because if you're going to Google like caffeine and brain health, you're actually going to see benefits. It's going to say that it's, and because there's like, again, in adults, it might be um, unlocking parts of your brain where we see more activity. So we see more clear thinking, we see more critical thinking. I once again want to get down to the facts that dose matters. So too much is not a good thing, and individual response. Caffeine does increase anxiety, increased jitters is like another thing, and that just makes you feel anxious. So but for some people, like in all things, like a little bit of anxiety could be good, like with anything, a little bit of stress can be good, a little bit of anxiety can be good because it's like, I better get this thing done, and so you a little bit is good. But for somebody who's like suffering from anxiety, maybe this is not good. And I think this is an important conversation for our teenagers because over the past 10 plus years, we keep seeing rising rates of anxiety and depression in teenagers. Um, Social pressures, social media, like sport pressure. And I think that if you're struggling with anxiety on any small amount, having high doses of caffeine is probably going to make that worse.
And just coming back to the central nervous system, it's not great for recovery and maybe getting a
Mm-mm.
really rested night of sleep. So it's just this like downward spiral with those high amounts. And I want to come back to the for teenage girls, the 100 milligram. Is that how
Yes.
like the cap that they
Yeah.
would have? Okay, so is
Yeah.
that like I'm trying to think of just, like, visuals. Is that just like a cup of coffee?
Yeah.
Or is a cup of coffee 80
Yeah.
milligrams? I forget the amounts, but
Depends home because everybody brews it different.
yeah, yeah.
So we typically say a cup of coffee or 8 ounces of coffee is going to be like 80 to 100 milligrams. Is Starbucks and Dunkin' Donuts do list on their websites, and I'm sorry I didn't write it down ahead of time, but they do list like their estimated caffeine content. Again, whoever the barista is might be doing it a little different, but they kind of have their standard protocol. So you can see, oh, I actually wrote down, I did write down one 16-ounce grande Starbucks hot coffee is 200 to 260 milligrams.
Oh my gosh.
That's 16 ounces. That's 2 cups
Yeah.
worth, right?
Yeah.
But like, what if you're getting, you might be getting a grande, but you've got milk in it, or it's blended into a frap, so it might be less than that.
Okay. Yeah,
A
because
shot
I
of
used to
like,
have frappuccinos when I was a teenager, and I'm like,
yeah,
was there 200 milligrams in there?
yeah. I'm sorry, we'd have to look it up again, but that's a shot of espresso is only like an ounce shot, and that's
Mhm.
typically around similar to what a cup of coffee is, around 80 milligrams. And in our lattes and fraps, usually they're using like one or two shots. So it's probably more like 80 to 160 milligrams. And
Okay,
then you've
thank
got the
goodness.
milk and sugar and ice. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I do think, like, again, if we're talking under 12, let's not introduce caffeine in coffee. But like your journey of like, I used to go to the coffee shop and get like a blended iced coffee or something like that. Like, that's probably okay. Maybe we don't want it to be a daily habit for reasons I'll talk about in just a moment, but like from a total caffeine content that's in your whole day, probably okay. It's these energy drinks that have a really high amount and the extra stimulants in there that gets really like scary, I would say. But what did I just say I was going to talk about? I said I'm going to talk about in just a moment, and then I forgot.
Um, so for the energy drinks, the biggest mistake I see people making is they'll be like, okay, well, my daughter woke up this morning and is tired. We had to rush to our game, and we're just going to give her this energy drink to make up for us rushing out the door and not taking time to eat breakfast. And the issue is like, well, the energy availability is the problem, and you're trying
Hmm.
to solve it with an energy drink that maybe has how many calories? Like 80 to
Yeah.
100. Some of them have 0 sugar. Like,
Right.
it's
Some don't
so
even have
bad,
any.
and they're,
Right.
like, seeing that as their, like, meal.
So I think this comes down to defining energy. So we think that caffeine is energy. It's not. It's fake energy. So what do I mean by that? So I talked about caffeine's effects on the heart, but how it's also working, it is a drug in your brain. It basically works with blocking adenosine receptors that feel fatigue. So when caffeine blocks that, your brain doesn't feel fatigue. So your body thinks you're energized because you're not feeling fatigue. That's not true. You don't actually, energy comes from food. Energy comes from nourishment and food. All you're doing is tricking your body to not feel fatigued. And I think when I realized this, that changed how I felt about caffeine, because I was like, wait, I don't want to trick my body into not feeling fatigued. One, if you're fatigued, I want to feel that so that I actually go to sleep. Because that's what'll make me not feel fatigued. But if I keep tricking myself into thinking that I'm not fatigued, then I'm not going to actually do the recovery and the sleep that's needed. So my body is not, you're not doing yourself any good by pretending that you're not fatigued, because your body's still fatigued. You're just tricking your brain into thinking it's not.
This
And
is so
then,
crucial.
yes, and then your body also doesn't actually have energy. This is why I call it fake energy, because it's just the lack of fatigue that you have. You don't actually have more energy. You only get more energy through eating food. So caffeine is not energy. So we call them energy drinks, but they're not. They're just blocking fatigue drinks.
This is crazy. So when I think about injury risk, fatigue is a huge factor in injury risk. And if these girls continue to trick their bodies,
Yes.
eventually something will break down
Oh
because
yeah.
the muscles aren't firing properly. Even if
Yeah.
you feel like you have that fake energy, the muscles aren't repaired because maybe you didn't get a good night's sleep and activate growth
Hmm.
hormone during rest. I mean, it's so bad. And then if you didn't eat the breakfast and you're not focusing on getting enough food, then your muscles aren't going to be rebuilding and repairing
Mm-mm.
properly. So
Right.
This is such an important discussion because I think people are using the energy drinks as a replacement too.
You're
Um,
right, and it shouldn't.
yeah.
Mm-mm. No, absolutely not. And that's exactly, I did look up to like why. Like I can come up with reasons why I think teens are using energy drinks, but found some actual studies, kind of digging into teen and teen athlete use of energy drinks and why they're choosing it. And the number one reason is the perceived energy gain. And so again, this is why this conversation is so important, to actually learn that it's not true energy gain. You're just tricking yourself. You're
Mhm.
not actually gaining energy. Um, and I say that as full disclosure. I said full disclosure that I'm sleep deprived currently. I've got a unique life situation that we don't need to get into. So like I'm engaging in that myself, but I'm not going to recommend that. And I'm also actively working on trying to get more sleep as well. And I'm actively working on, what I try and do is not have an afternoon coffee. I'm like, okay, I can have it in my morning, but not in the afternoon. But yeah, the perceived energy gain, you're actually just tricking yourself. The second reason teens are choosing energy drinks is just the taste, which is sad, I think, from like the marketing standpoint. It's true. Like they have like cotton candy flavored energy drinks. Like, like it's true that they're making these things taste really good, whether it's through sugar or all the fake sugars. So the sucralose or the erythritol or things like that. So I don't know, but I'd rather see like, can we get a good, yummy tasting electrolyte or even just like the Gatorade, Can we get the icy blue Gatorade and have that actually provide us with like sodium, potassium, and sugars and carbs that actually fuel your performance and not just fake you into thinking you've got energy. And then the last reason that teens, and by the way, the taste in this last reason, which is to stay awake, these are very close, number two and three, very close to the first reason, the perceived energy gain. But to stay awake, that makes me sad that teen athletes and teenagers feel that they need an energy drink to stay awake, because I think that says something really big about what we're prioritizing here. Like everybody needs more sleep. I need more sleep. But like teenagers, their brains are developing, they're trying to grow muscle, they're trying to learn, they're trying to be social. Like they need to get a good night of sleep. They shouldn't need to be relying on an energy drink to stay awake. I also disclosed to you my husband's addicted to Monster energy drinks. He's in the military and sometimes he works 15-hour shifts working. Sometimes he works overnight. So like I'm not taking responsibility for his monster drink addiction, and I'm trying to work on it with him. But in his career field, it's like, is it nicotine or is it like they're working 15-hour shifts for like 2 weeks straight, and it's a different scenario that I'm not endorsing. But we don't need teenagers who are just trying to wake up and go to school and play a sport should not feel that they need an energy drink to stay awake. That's sad to me.
Yeah, and look, I'm glad you give the example of just, your own journey with this and your husband. I mean, you're just in such a unique part of life where you are sleep deprived and it is what it is. But I think when it comes to our teen female athletes, if they're so tired that they feel they need that caffeine, then at least they can cut back in their schedule, right? Like
Yeah.
you don't have
Yes.
to do 3 sports in a season. You can manage your time better and not procrastinate homework. I mean, there's just so many ways to go about it. And when we talk about like overtraining and performance, one of the first symptoms is chronic fatigue.
Yeah.
So if you're overtraining, that means you're doing too much. And look, you can control your schedule and you can cut back. Parents, you can say no and cut back. And I think if
Yeah.
you see your daughter constantly tired, you need to check in with her and ask
Hmm.
questions.
And I love how you mentioned overtraining syndrome, and earlier you mentioned injuries, because this is another risk of like consuming the caffeine or these energy drinks. If you keep thinking, I'm not tired, I've got energy, and you keep pushing through, but your body is tired, your cells are tired, your hormones are tired, your muscles are tired, but you keep drinking caffeine or an energy drink just to push through, you're going to end up with overtraining syndrome. You're going to end up with an injury because it's fake energy. It's not real energy. You are tired. You're just pretending you're not, and you're masking it. So those things aren't going to happen.
Yeah. And I think again, just coming back to the brain still developing, I think like now you and I as adults, we can recognize, we're in a certain season, but then eventually like we're able to take a step back and be like, wait, I am consuming too much. But for the teenage brain, they're just like, no, I feel great. Like I'm on this high of
Yeah.
caffeine, and they
Yeah.
don't think about it because they don't have their frontal lobes developed quite yet. So it's
Right.
very different. Like us adults, we can control those addictions a little bit more and be more aware of them. Whereas teens are
Hmm.
like, oh, there's nothing wrong with what I'm doing.
Hmm. Yeah. And I didn't write this down in my notes, but as I was kind of doing a little bit of research, I did see some information alluding to the idea that teenagers who get into caffeine use and energy drink consumption are more likely to engage in like other generally bad habits. So whether it's, excessive sugar or smoking or
Gambling.
nicotine, gambling, like there's correlations to that because it comes down to not treating your body and mind right. And like you said, like one habit can kind of lead to a bunch of others. And so um, I think this is so important for not to be fooled by the industry who creates these products to make you believe that they're good for you or healthy. The other energy drink we haven't talked about yet, and I hope I'm saying it right. Um, Alani,
I've
Ala-
heard some girls mention
Alani New.
that, and they're like, "It tastes so good. You have to try it." I'm like, "I'm good, guys."
They're targeting the girls.
They are. Yep.
They've got these pink,
Mhm.
teal cans. They're targeting the girls. It's
Mhm.
rampant in the volleyball community right now. So they're targeting the girls because, to be honest, too, this conversation, energy drinks are typically consumed by more men and males and boys. So even in the teenager space, it's used by boys more than girls. It is used by athletes more than non-athletes as well because of that perceived energy or perceived health benefits. So there's more girl athletes using it than um, girl non-athletes. But this is where that brand is like targeting the girls because of the flavors and how like colorful the can is. And that's just sad that the industry is gonna prey on teenagers like that.
Mhm. And I'm
Yeah.
starting to notice they're doing it more through influencer marketing. So, kind of like a bunch of other supplements like gut health and green powders. They're getting these famous female influencers who aren't athletes. I mean, they have pretty easy lives and they just model and travel the world. And they're
Hmm.
basically just doing a post, a paid ad on Instagram, and they make thousands of dollars for that
Yeah.
post. And they're like, look at me, I'm drinking Bang Energy. And then our teenage girls see, wow, she looks good. She's vibrant. She looks like she's glowing and she always has unlimited energy. I want to be her. And that's where it gets so dangerous with the
Yeah.
influencer marketing. And these influencers, they don't give a crap about our teen girls. They want to get paid for that Instagram post,
Hmm.
and that's it. So they're laughing all the way to the bank when teen girls are just suffering and buying into all this. And I think sometimes the parents buy into it too. And that's what's even
Yeah.
scarier to me is the parents are like, no, my girl needs the energy drink.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm honestly shocked to hear that a parent would think that, but at the same time, they think that these ingredients are good. That's what the marketing is doing. Is because there's other stuff in there, right? There's B vitamins and green tea
And
extract, and you think that
guarana, green
guarana,
tea.
and
Yeah.
we just assume that's good. It's maybe not. So like, go ahead and have a cup of brewed green tea. That's got anti-cancer benefits, antioxidation. That's great, and that's gonna get you like 40 milligrams of caffeine. That's fine, but you're adding it as this extract on top of all the other ingredients. And by the way, the B vitamins that are in energy drinks, it's totally unnecessary. It's
Mhm.
so unnecessary. So B vitamins do help with energy metabolism. First of all, let's talk about energy. That's coming from carbohydrates. What do B vitamins? B vitamins actually help you break down carbohydrates. But that means you need to be eating food. You need to be eating carbohydrates. You should have had real food before your game or practice. It's not helping, like, especially if you got a sugar-free energy drink. Like, the B vitamins aren't helping you metabolize that energy because there's no energy in there because it's sugar-free. Um, and the amounts are just ridiculous. It's just way too much. Like, I mean, 1,000% of your B12. Most of those B vitamins you just pee out in excess because they're water soluble.
I was just gonna ask that. Are we just paying for expensive pee over here?
For the most part, yeah. There's some situations where there's some research that a higher B vitamin intake can help, and like B complex vitamins might help with cognitive function and things like that. So there's some research there, but this is not. We do not need these excessive amounts. No,
Good to
no.
know.
You're mostly peeing it out.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and what's interesting is the price of some of these drinks. It's kind of like, oh, well, you're paying a premium price to just get this amazing flavor and just these natural, amazing ingredients. And it's like, well, screw you guys. I'm just gonna stick to eating my apples and having a well-balanced meal over here.
mm-hmm.
Like, it's
And
crazy.
speaking of price, like I'm sharing real life because it's real. You would not believe how much money my husband spends on Monster Energy drinks. Like from
Do you
a monthly perspective, I shared with you like part of
do
his
you
I
share them? Or is it like too embarrassing?
it's embarrassing for him and maybe
Okay.
embarrassing for me because I'm his wife
You
and I
don't
can't
have to
influence him.
share.
But
You can tell me off air.
well, yeah, when you go to a gas station, they're about 250 a drink. So if you consume one or two a day, what's your weekly or monthly budget of that looking like when you could be getting more sleep and real food? That's your real anti-fatigue and true energy. Um, and yeah, I sorry, I'm being, I don't want to sound hypocritical here, but my husband is in the military, works long shift, and also his energy drink consumption increased when he stopped his nicotine, which I was very proud of him for doing.
Mm.
But one behavior to another, and we fight our own demons on certain things. But what if his journey, what if he never got into that? This is where I'm saying too, like as a teenager doing an energy drink, what's the next thing it's going to lead to?
Right. And that's why I appreciate you sharing this, because I think the earlier we can get girls into good habits with this and just getting their energy through enough food and plenty of balanced meals, the better.
Yeah,
And we just set them up for success when they're adults and they can discern when to maybe use it strategically or when to cut back. So
yeah.
that's key here.
So I'll say, like, these young girls, if they end up competing in collegiate athletics, um they might find that, you know what, before a big game, like I can use caffeine strategically to help me out because there is some research of caffeine's benefits on performance. But again, you want to be fully developed and you want to follow that guidance of the milligram per kilogram body weight recommendation as well. And I've got blogs about this on my website that are specific to adult athletes. Um, but even then, it's not, there's so many things that affect performance at the end of the day. Like it's not this given that if you drink caffeine, you will run faster or jump higher. It's not a given. And there's so many individual responses. Um, Also, just to throw this in the mix here, there's a genetic variation as well that your genes play a role in how much caffeine affects you or not. Um, so some people as adults will say like, "Oh, I can have coffee and it I can still go to sleep just fine." Whereas other people are like, "No, it keeps me up all night because there's a gene that affects how much this affects you." Okay, sorry if I'm all over the place, but one other important fact I do want to share for our teens and parents is the half-life of caffeine. So what that means is that if you consume 100 milligrams, it can stay in your system for 9 to 12 hours. But the half life, meaning for that 100 milligrams to go down to about 50%, is 4 to 6 hours. So this is why, like drinking a cup of coffee in the morning, 4 to 6 hours later, so if you drink a cup of coffee at 8 a.m., we're talking about by noon or 2 p.m., that 100 milligrams is down to 50 milligrams in your system. And then you continue on your day like it's still in your system 12 hours later, but you're probably going to be able to go to bed just fine at night because, it's at that point almost fully metabolized. But if you go and you have an afternoon coffee or you've got a 6 p.m. game and you're thinking, let me have an energy drink at 5:30 or 5 for my game. 6 hours later, midnight, half of that energy drink is still in your system, keeping you awake. And I just think the conversation about sleep for teenagers is so important. And we should definitely not be having like evening energy drinks before a game or before practice. That is still in your system and still keeping you awake. And then that's the cycle of like insomnia and sleep deprivation that teenagers are dealing with.
So always brings us back to the basics that we're always discussing on this podcast. And yeah, what I took from all this is just making sure our young girls are eating enough, getting the nutrients they need, and getting enough sleep and recovery so that they're not always fatigued and feel like they have to reach for that energy drink. So,
Yeah.
parents, everyone listening, if this episode impacted you, and you really want to share it with someone who you think needs to hear this, please share it. If this resonated with you, feel free to leave a comment. We're happy to discuss more, and I'll leave Lindsay's information in the caption below. She is a regular guest on the podcast. She'll definitely be back soon, so be sure to check her out. I'll also link her YouTube channel where she talks about youth female athlete nutrition specifically. It is absolutely incredible, so be sure to head over there. And we appreciate you listening. I'll see everyone on the next episode.